listen, never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Get on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
Welcome to another edition of West Coast Bias. It's World Series post weekend, and who better, I should say, to recap this than number 2 in the operation, the legend himself, Rob Bradford, from WEEI, and obviously the number 2 guy here at Baseball Isn't Boring, because the number 1 guy is Joe Kelly, who we heard from this weekend.
The number 1 guy does no work. Like he does no work. But I tell you what, I am all in on West Coast Bias, not only because of the excellent work that you do, the excellent title of the segment on the Baseball Isn't Boring Network, but also because I am, considering I didn't see a cloud the entire time that I was out in LA, I am definitely biased toward the West Coast right now. So yes, I loved it, man. I love being out there. I love the scene. I love the vibes. I always do. But the World Series with the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium just hits.
It's one of the most what's the word in English?
Yeah, photogenic. I mean,
photogenic places that you'll ever see. Like if you've never been to LA or to Dodger Stadium, just go. Just go once. Even Petco, as much as I know, Dodger fan, myself included, dislikes that fan base. Petco's one of the most photogenic places on the planet. It's gonna kill some people that I say this. T-Mobile Park in San Francisco, one of the most beautiful places that you can go to in all of baseball. I mean, there's also a ton of other ballparks on your side of the country, but we have mountains over here, real mountains, not the rolling hills that y'all have.
The rolling. And let me just tell you this: the story behind the story. There's a lot of story behind the stories, and I can throw it in there as we talk, but. Yeah, the parking lot at Dodger Stadium is super confusing, and it's super confusing. So I am walking around. I don't think this falls under workman's comp, but I'm walking around with basically like a torn calf muscle because after game 1, I was trying to find my car, and Alonso, it's like this expansive place where I found these 3 sheds, and I'm like, okay, that's my point where my car, I line that up with my car. That's where I know to return. I could not find those 3 sheds. I walked 3 miles, like the parking lot's basically empty. And finally someone said, oh yeah, no, you're going to want to go that way. And I forgot that there's a whole nother level down. Yes. So nobody cares about this. I'm just crying myself a river that I basically tore myself a calf muscle trying to find my car, but it's all worth it. I powered through, and it was a good time.
It's the old saying in the music world, and I believe in the Marine Corps, it's adapt or die. So you just gotta make it work.
Excellent point.
I mean, and you saw it too, right? To tie it back into kind of what's going on when you come up Vince Scully Avenue right now onto Stadium Way.
Yeah.
The homage right now to the legendary Fernando Valenzuela. And that's the one thing when I'd had that conversation the other day with oh my gosh, I'm having a brain fart right now. Gustavo Arellano from the LA Times. Apologies to Gustavo. It's been a long weekend. Sorry, Gustavo. I even said, hey, what do you think those memorials are going to look like? He's like, oh, they're going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and, they were.
They're expansive.
It was striking. You take that turn, and obviously that sign is sort of iconic, Dodger Stadium, but then it's just covered, and with people, and the entire time people were around that, like up and down, before the game, after the game, everything, and that was the thing when you're driving up to the World Series for that. I think actually it was the workout day, and you're like, all right, Dodger Stadium, World Series, and then that's the first thing you're hit with, and it is, and I'm glad I was, honestly. Because we should remember this is a big part. That was a big part of the pregame ceremony Fernando Valenzuela, and we should be talking about that, and should be the first thing that we see, because just because his tragic passing happened in the middle of the World Series doesn't mean that we should let this huge event eclipse what's going on or his memory. And I don't think it did. I think that so many people were asked about it, responded to it, respected it. We had the ceremony. Even, I could sit there and listen to Brent Honeywell Jr. talk all day about throwing a screwball, because for probably you're the same way, Alonso. For me, when I think of screwball, I think of Fernando Valenzuela every time. So I'm glad you brought that up.
No, and again, the Dodgers and Major League Baseball, I think, did a good job. Kind of with the tribute of it all. They shout out to the homie Julian Torres, who's the mariachi that performed there, and he did that tribute to him. I'm sure there wasn't a dry eye in the place when he did that. And just, even we call them coronas in our culture, which are those flower arrangements that they had kind of by the 34, that's out front. And then the 34 that's on the ring, obviously, because the 34 has been retired. So I think, it's those little things that kind of connected to the community, right? Because like we said with Gustavo, it's all about la cultura, culture, right? And they tied it in, and I think they did it beautifully to what Fernando would want. So I think that was great. I wanted to ask you though, bringing it back to the series. You were there for media day. You were there talking to all the guys. You talked to Jazz Chisholm. You talked to all those guys. If you haven't seen those clips, please watch them. They're on YouTube. They're on Instagram. They're on Twitter, all over the place. For you, before the series started, what was the vibe like on both sides?
Well, I think that, it's probably a similar vibe where you get to that point and you just think you can't be beat. You think that everything's going to go your way, and you think you have everything lined up too. I mean, I think that's a big part of it, which is sometimes you're sort of limping into it. You have to, oh, well, we had to really empty the tank in the previous series. We're going to this series and we're going to lean on the vibes. No, I mean, the fact is that you had Jack Flaherty against Garrett Cole. Like, you had your two guys. You had your two guys lined up. You had your bullpens rested. You had your guy Freddie Freeman, as we found out, had gotten much healthier. You have guys on the Yankee side which are feeling pretty good about themselves. So it's sort of just a cliche answer, but really, you just, everybody felt good. But I do think that one of the things that, you have that media day, which, by the way, Alonso, I love it, because you can ask Jazz Chisholm about his spirit animals, and he wants to sit there and talk. You can ask Luke Weaver about watching Yamamoto videos. You can do all of this. And once the series starts, there's nothing you can't do anything with anybody except to talk to Joe about getting tattoos. But that was, but the thing is that, so once you get past that and the games get going, then you really find out. I think one of the things is, A, who is gonna rise to the moment. B, how much, as we found out with Freddie Freeman, how much is the layoff going to either hurt or help somebody? And also another thing is, how much playing have impacted, especially pitchers? Like, I think some of these bullpen guys, like, their arms are hanging by a thread. I mean, I think that we take it for granted that how long and how much more these guys have had to play, especially pitchers. And I think that's another thing that we're finding out now.
No, absolutely. And to your point, I mean, Garrett Cole and both Jack Flaherty. I mean, Jack Flaherty gave up those two, the 2 runs, but they were dealing, right? I mean, they both had great outings. That was a great bounce back for Flaherty, who I think it's been reported, but he was sick, right, when he played when he threw against the Mets. And whether you like it or not, I mean, when you're sick, you're just not going to be 100%. That's just a part of the deal. But he went out there and grinded it, and no excuses being made. That's just what it is. And there was the offensive output wasn't really there, right, until the Yankees were right up in it, and you could definitely tell that the Yankees thought they kind of had this in the bag. They thought they had game 1 in the bag. And statistically speaking, I think the statistic is either 63 or 64% of the time when you win game 1 of the World Series, you win the World Series. So game 1's obviously a very important. I mean, all of the games are important, but game 1 is just as important as the clinching game, apparently. And in a time of stats, that's a super important stat.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Dodgers to kind of come from behind and do, obviously we now know what happened, right? Freddie Freeman hits the first walk-off grand slam in the history of World Series, the first World Series grand slam walk-off in dramatic fashion. I mean, number one, you were talking to Matt about it a minute ago that there's guys' arms that are hanging off, by a thread. Nestor Cortez, his arm is definitely hanging off by a thread.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, and you have to tip your cap and respect though, because he's putting it out there for the ring, right?
I love Nestor, man. Like we've had him on a couple times, and he's had a great year. And listen, 27 days without pitching. I don't care how side sessions or whatever you do. That spot, and I know why they went to him instead of Tim Hill. But I do want to come back to something you said, which is sort of made me think. It's funny because that game one was a perfect example of what you asked about what were the vibes. Well, both teams, they get to the point in a close game, they both think we're predestined to win because that's what has happened to this point.
Yeah.
In Cleveland or in New York or the series before that, this is how it's going to happen. And as you're sitting there, that's the vibe that you get from the Yankees where, hey, listen, doesn't matter where we play, we're going to win because that's what happens. And look, it's just breaking our way. But as we found out, the Dodgers have that same sort of fun. And I think even in game two, it sort of carried over where both teams felt that way. The Yankees felt that way probably up until that Trevino hits the fly ball, the warning track. So, but it's really, I think that it's a unique situation where you have these ultra talented teams feeling really, really, really good about themselves heading into this series.
For those folks that don't fully understand why Nestor was put in that spot over Tim Hill, can you reiterate why that happened?
Well, I'm probably missing some of it, but some of it was, they talk about spin, spin, right? That they wanted Nestor could spin the ball, Tim Hill and who they weren't really high on or didn't feel like we talked about wearing down and maybe not having a lot of momentum. He wasn't that same sort of pitcher. So they wanted, now the question is, when they intentionally walk Mookie, well, Mookie doesn't have great numbers against Nestor Cortez. And Nestor Cortez comes in, he gets the first pitch pop up. So he gets his job done there. I get it. I get why they walked Mookie, the lefty on lefty thing.
Yeah.
But I think that, Alonso, in hindsight, what Aaron Boone didn't know was how much better a player Freddie Freeman was in that game than he was the week before. Right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I agree with you. I think, obviously, we know the stats with Mookie and Nestor. That's why they walked him. And then they thought getting to Freddie was the guaranteed out because he's a hobbled guy. That's exactly what I was thinking too. So I'm glad that you're pointing that out because I feel like some people are just like, oh, well, you're walking an MVP to get to an MVP. And it's like, well, no, in their minds, they thought that Freddie was just not 100%.
He was and we all applaud him. Good job, Freddie, for playing and gutting it through the series against the Mets. But he looked like a shell of himself. And you're just thinking, and you have nothing to go by. You have sure he got the triple before, but it was kind of a fluky thing. I think it was like it was opposite field into the corner. Verdugo butchers it. Fine, you get that hit and you run, and okay, you look a little bit better running, but still, you don't have an entire game of knowing, wow, Freddie Freeman's swing looks different, and you don't have also the sound bites after that game. I sat there talking to Daniel Hudson about this, and he said, we saw Freddie Freeman in the workouts. It was a different guy. Like, we saw him. Those guys, everybody in that Dodger Stadium or Dodger clubhouse after that game, in hindsight, we're saying we saw him taking his swings in the previous days, and we knew that it was going to be a different guy. Aaron Boone didn't know that.
Yeah. No, and that's a part of the deal, right? I mean, it's gamesmanship to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
And you gotta play the game a little bit. And listen, hindsight's always 20/20. I'm sure and we saw it on Aaron Boone's face after the fact where he's just kind of like, oh man, like he knew, right? I mean, he knew, and it's, I mean, and in my opinion, right, I'm of the mindset of I'd rather lose by 100 than lose by one. So I guess if there is if I was a Yankee fan, the silver lining is, well, I'd rather lose by 3 than one. That's how I look at it. And listen, in game two, they were in it. I mean, they
Yeah.
were in it. And then the Dodgers just, I mean, Teoscar Hernandez's bat needed to wake up, and it woke up at the best time for the Dodgers. And that's just kind of the beginning of the end with that game. But I mean, they still battled to the end. I mean, that ninth inning was not a clean inning.
No,
by
I
any
think,
means.
and I think it comes back to what I said. I think that the Yankees are a team that they got to this point because a lot of people, when Cleveland won a game, everyone's like, oh, here comes Cleveland. No, I mean, Yankees are a resilient team. They're a talented team. And it's interesting. I was having this conversation on the field with Robert Flores of MLB Network,
Yeah.
and we were broaching the question because Alonso, the Freddie Freeman thing, obviously an unbelievable game. Like,
Yeah.
you couldn't wipe the smile off John Legend's face when I gave him this. It wasn't hard. So it was just an incredible environment, atmosphere, the clubhouse, and everything else. But we were talking about this. You don't take a second, and this is leading into game two. You don't take a second to remember, say, how will that home run, that grand slam, be remembered if the Yankees just rolled from then? Like, how was it? We wouldn't remember it like Kirk Gibson, like we are now.
No. No.
And we were
No.
trying to think about these an iconic World Series home run where the team ended up losing the series, but it was still perceived as an iconic home run. And number one, it's really hard to do. And number two, the one that jumped to mind was Rajai Davis in Cleveland against the Cubs. Right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't usually, if you have those home runs, but if you lose,
Who cares?
Who cares? Yeah.
It's like the Max Muncy 18th inning home run against your Sox.
Great point. Yeah.
But that's one of the greatest World Series games ever. And it's kind of just a footnote in that series, right? I mean, and Nathan Eovaldi came out and maybe shouldn't have been pitching in that moment, but you had no choice because you'd kind of emptied all the bullpens, and Max ended it, right? And so it's one of, to your point, like it's there is a home run, there's important home runs, and then there's iconic home runs, right? And for me, I mean, I tweeted this. I was at BGO's in Houston because I'm in Houston for work.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of Yankee fans, a bunch of Astros fans that are for sure hate watching this game. And then there was like some Dodger fans trickled in. And I don't wear like Dodger garb when I'm out and about in public for games. For some reason, I'm weird. Like I don't like to wear, like, plus I'm there for work, so I had to pack a certain way. But anyway, I'm watching on these two massive screens, and my coworkers were just like, "Are you stressed?" I'm like, "A little bit." And then when they walked Mookie, I was just like, "Oh no!" Like I know what they're trying to do here. They're trying to get the ground out, to get for talking about the spin. They're trying to get the ground out, with the guaranteed out, if you will, with Freddie. That's how they're looking at it. And Ohtani, truthfully, just missed one pitch too. Like he had just missed that pitch. If he, he swung a little too early, and that's why it popped up. But Ohtani's eyes lit up a little bit when he saw that ball, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna crush this." So I mean, it could have ended right there too, right? And then first pitch for swing for Freddie, and I was just like, "No way!" Like and Astros fans, audible gasp from those people. Yankee fan that was sitting in front of me, like in these little bleachers, just palm facing, just like, "Oh no, what did we do?" And I was just shocked. Like I was just shocked that happened, in part because it's not only is it a walk-off, but it's a walk-off grand slam. And so if it took the air out of that room, imagine the air that it took out of that Yankees clubhouse.
Oh,
because that's a devastating blow, man.
No, and it's the funny thing is, you mentioned the Max Muncy home run, and it's another good quote, I think, by Kopech after the game. He's like, I think I'm going to paraphrase, but he said something to the effect of that he went up to Muncy and said, "I can't imagine how Freddie feels right now." And Muncy just goes, "I have a pretty good idea," which I'm like, that's good quote. But that was, and you talk about taking the air out of the opposing with a home run like that, where in that game, literally the I also call it the t-shirt gun, the trampoline, the momentum really wasn't from the home run. It was from the guy who gave up the home run.
Yeah.
Evaldi, who got the standing ovation. And to this day, they said, Brazier said it the other day. He's like, we pretty much knew we were going to win after that, which was an aberration. And I come back to the Yankees. I'll give them a ton of credit. And I do think that this is if you want to get into nuts and bolts about, we talk about vibes and motion and momentum and everything else. I do think that having starting pitchers, being able to protect a bullpen, because both teams have good bullpens, but you can't wear them out too much. But having starting pitchers to be able to do that, whichever team is able to do that the most, I think has the huge upper hand. And Flaherty and Cole is called pretty much a draw, right?
Yeah.
And Yamamoto was just enough better than Rodon. And I think that was a huge, huge difference.
And I mean, like I said on the episode that we dropped the other day with Chad Jennings, I expected Yamamoto to improve kind of on his last outing, in part because, I mean, we have to remember he's a 25-year-old. I mean, that's still really young. It's his first season in the show, very different than what you do in Japan. The postseason is way more intense here than anything they do in Japan. That's not a knock on Japan either. Japanese baseball, if you're not privy to it, watch it. It's the environments are very different. They're a little more electric than what we have here. I mean, it's almost like a soccer game, if you will. But it's all about respect too, right? They if they hit a pitcher, they bow. Like, there's these things that are very different than here. It's just some cultural things. But one of the biggest differences is the pitching rotations, how they throw, right? They don't throw every fifth day. It's usually like anywhere between 6 to 8 days, depending on the guy. It's a very different, even just rigorous format to how they prepare. So it's very different. So sometimes that curve is huge when you come stateside because it's very different here. Like, you got to go every fifth day. You have your side session days, all that stuff. And Yoshi, to his credit, has adapted pretty well, even after that injury where, when you're talking shoulder stuff, sometimes that's it for the year. Like, they're shutting you down, especially with the amount of money that they're paying him. It's one of those where you got to protect the investment a little bit. But in that first outing in the NLDS, he had that deer in the headlights moment, right? And I think that's kind of when he realized, like, okay, now I know what this is like. Let me settle this down. Let me go back to what I know works. And he did just that. And I think he did a great job, in that Mets series, but an even better job in the moment when it matters the most, in the World Series against the super dangerous Yankees lineup. Like, we don't even need to talk about that. And to go out there and throw 6 1/3, I think is what the line was, 6 1/3, gave up a hit, gave up 1 run, 2 walks, and I believe 4 strikeouts. That's huge. That's huge for the Dodgers because, like you said, it takes some pressure off of the bullpen.
They desperately need it. And it's a great points by you. And I do think, and you have a better perspective of this, but I do think that not only is he getting used to the environment and everything else, but I do think that we're slowly seeing him ramp up from having this time off. I mean, he came back, he's having these 4-inning outings, and you're saying, oh, he's okay. But now you could almost see this sort of outing coming. And by the way, now if you have to throw him again, you feel like this is Jordan Montgomery, Nathan Eovaldi of last year. Like, for me anyway, maybe not, but and that is the gift that the Dodgers, I think, are getting with Yamamoto.
Well, and I think too, to your point, you're learning on the fly, right? And in a good way, where you're getting kind of that like real time training, right? And I mean, listen, there is worry that Ohtani, I mean, there's like conflicting reports out there that he may or may not play in Game 3, and obviously that'd be a huge blow. But I feel like with where the Dodgers are, given that you now know kind of what you've gotten out of Flaherty, what you've gotten out of Yamamoto, it sounds like after Walker Buehler, it sounds like, depending on kind of what the situation is, could be a bullpen game, or you may go Flaherty again. Just kind of depends on what the deal is. Even if you lose Ohtani, you still have a really good lineup because Tommy Edman's playing out of his mind. You have, obviously, you have your Max Muncies, your Will Smiths, You have dogs, and the Yankees, to their credit, I mean, they have dogs too, right? I mean, if they were to lose one of their big three, they still have other bats on the bench that they can kind of try to make that lineup work with. So I mean, they're all, for all intents and purposes. I said this with Chad, and I'll say it again. I don't think there was a favorite going into this. I think it was a push. This is probably as close to a pick'em as of a World Series that we've had in a long time, because they're pretty even, kind of on all fronts of everything. But it's also, as you know too, talking about looking back at the Red Sox series with the Dodgers, it's who's playing the best ball right now. And you can make an argument that they're both playing really good ball. Just the Dodgers are just taking advantage of more of the little mistakes right now than the Yankees are.
Yeah, and to your point, okay, listen, Otani's Otani. He's already had some big hits, no question about it. The ball that he rifled off center. These are big hits. He's already had big hits. He's a good player. We all know this, but the Dodgers were able to advance without one of the team's best hitters, basically as a piece of the entire equation. That's Freddie Freeman, right?
Yeah.
You have that good a lineup where you can function, you can score runs, a lot of runs, without one of the best hitters in the game. And I'm not saying that, having Otani is, no big deal, but to your point, you can function without Otani. Like, you can. If Otani does not play another game, the Dodgers can still win very easily. Not very easily, but they could win the World Series and with nobody being surprised.
So let me ask you this before we look at Game 3. There's rumor and innuendo out there that the Dodgers are going to be in on Juan Soto. I'm going to say what I said about Otani, and I know some people lit me up about it. I don't think that they need Juan Soto. In my opinion, you should re-sign Teoscar. Give him, I said it before during the Mets series, give him 3 years, 175. Just go do that right now. Make that happen. And then re-up Flaherty. He's probably going to want a 5-year deal. I'm curious to see what that's the one question I have is, what do they think that dollar amount is? I honestly don't know. But if I know the number, it's probably 30 plus a year is probably what he's going to want. And then you got to fill in some of this depth, right? Edmund, you don't have to re-up him for a little while. There's an argument that you got to bring Kike back, so on and so forth, right? Given all that, if you're Andrew Friedman, Rob, would you go out and try to court Juan Soto?
Listen, if ownership says, hey, sure, why not? Why not? I remember, my grandmother used to give me, when they were trying to spoil us, say, hey, go to the toy store, here, buy some, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't need that, but sure. If ownership says that about Soto, Andrew Friedman can say, sure. It always comes back to this, Alonso. Any signing you make, does it impact not making a signing that maybe is more important? And to your point, and so would I rather have Juan Soto than Teoscar Hernandez? Yes, I would, of course. But at the same time, if they can do it without impacting what they truly need, which in my opinion is, like you said, is knowing what you have in starting pitching. You have a good base, you have guys coming back, but still, you need to get starting. You need to have some sort of fail-safe and if guys get hurt, because as we're sitting here right now, this is not the ideal scenario for the Dodgers. It just isn't. Jack Flaherty is a good pitcher, but I don't think coming in it was like, oh, he's the lockdown, no question about it, ace. So he's a good pitcher. He's a guy that you want. Walker Buehler, Yamamoto, they're good pitchers. They're good pitchers. But if you're going to have this Uber team, if you're going to have this, no question about it, we're going to be better than everybody else team, I still feel like you need to find that solution in the lockdown starting pitcher. That's just me. So, again, long answer to your question, but I would say, sure, why not? As long as it doesn't impact, I think, what you really need, which is pitching.
And for me, and I know this may be a hot take, to me it's not, is the position that they've really needed to fill really ever since the guy left, that they couldn't re-up him is shortstop, right? I mean, the shortstop is a big hole and the farm doesn't necessarily have kind of that shortstop, if you will, waiting for them there, right? If it's, and I mean, we're going to hear it, the Rangers are apparently being told that they got to cut payroll. So maybe they, hey, let's trade for Corey Seager. I don't know if that's the move personally, but Tommy Edman isn't necessarily a bad option at shortstop. But is that your everyday shortstop for the next 5 to 6 years? That's the real question, right? And there's going to be an argument that he is, just because of what has happened in this postseason, especially if the Dodgers go on to win. That'll be super interesting to see how that plays out. But to your point, I mean, and listen, we all know too, agents like to leak stuff, and it's super possible that our good friend Boris, I believe, is Juan Soto's agent, probably leaked that to kind of start, getting those conversations going in the World Series. I'm hoping it's not a distraction for Soto, because he's been playing out of his mind. That home run that he hit, that towering bomb at Dodger Stadium, some people are going to be like, oh, well, it was only 360 feet. If you've ever been in Dodger Stadium, that's a hard corner to hit a bomb into, especially the way that Soto did it last night.
Yeah. He's an unbelievable player. And I think the one thing that Soto has turned the corner on, and whether it's perception, part of the master plan in a contract year, but I heard so many people talk about in San Diego how that was terrible fit, didn't get along with Melvin and everything else. It was not trending in the right way when it came to Juan Soto as the good clubhouse guy. Yeah. And this year, and this is, I think, a huge tip of the hat goes to Aaron Judge, because he controls that clubhouse. But Juan Soto has been nothing but good for that team. Once again, who knows? Contract year, I don't know. All I know is that he's an iconic player. And if any team that has the money should absolutely try to sign him.
And if you buy into the culture, that's a huge factor. It doesn't matter where you go. And I think fans forget that part, that the clubhouse culture means a lot I mean, the Dodgers are the perfect example. You're around our boss, Joe Kelly, enough to know that culture is really tight. And if you really can't win if you don't have a good culture, that's just the reality.
Yeah. And the Dodgers do, like, you can tell. The Phillies did, the Phillies do, the Dodgers do, you can tell. And it's not a mistake. You hear about the Guardians, you hear about, and the Yankees. The Yankees, think about this, is that a lot has been made about Verdugo and Jazz Chisholm coming into that clubhouse. But, or even like Marcus Stroman, whatever, like, problems that he might have had in the past. But when you have guys in there that control a clubhouse, and not every clubhouse has this. Like I always say this, Alonso, I think captains in baseball are most of the time stupid to put a C on someone's chest, because a clubhouse is it's different factions of the room. It's the pitchers, it's the hitters, it's the utility guy, whatever it is. But every once in a while, you get a clubhouse where you have a judge, and in this case, I think Rizzo too, where you have said everything is filtered through those guys. Yeah. And I think the Dodgers, have that dynamic, because another part about the Dodgers is that you have, I am a big believer, if you can get the talent to have the 30-somethings who are secure in their own existence, and they're not trying to be major league players. They're not chasing, how do I get through a major league season? But they know they are secure in their existence. The Dodgers bullpen, that's exactly what that is, Alonso. Yeah. Right? How many 30-somethings do they have in there? And they all know their deal. They all know it. And they also know if they blow a game, there's always tomorrow, because that's how baseball has worked for these guys who have been, I think, who they said, oh man, who said it the other day that they had reached their 10 years, that they had like 11 guys with 10 years in the team.
I know what you're talking about though. Yeah, but I mean, and that's huge. That's huge, because to your point, you have, I mean, Kopech isn't going anywhere. Frazier isn't going anywhere, in the sense of like they're secure with, they know that even if they don't stay here, they're going to get a job somewhere, right? So they're super secure with where they're at, and that's, I think, to your point, something that like fans don't really kind of see per se. Not to talk down on the fans by any means, but that's a huge factor. I mean, that's why both of these teams, why their bullpens are so tight, right? Because if you, in my opinion, if you have a tight bullpen, that's what makes your clubhouse special. And the reason I say that is because, as you said, there's always factions, right? There's always these weird factions. And listen, to be a relief pitcher, to be a closer, you kind of have to be a little crazy anyway. And you have to be able to be around like-minded people. And if you're not, then it's just there's not going to be any chemistry. You don't really gel, this, that, or the other. And you're around these dudes a lot. If you're in the clubhouse, you're around each other a
More
ton.
than your families. Yeah. I mean,
oh yeah, especially right now.
Yeah. And I look at it, the Red Sox, for instance, this year, and I think this is a few different teams in baseball where bullpens are built by throwing a lot of, I don't want to say crap, a lot of stuff against the wall.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like talent against the wall and see which one sticks. But when you do that, you have a lot of guys who are trying to find their way. They're desperately trying to find their way. So every time they go out and throw a side session or try a new pitch, you have these TrackMan devices or Hawkeye or whatever, like set up that everything's measured. You're trying to impress everybody every single day. Every single day is building toward building your resume. When you have a bunch of guys who are 30-somethings, who are secure in their own existence, who know this is just who I am, then that goes a long, long way. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing with the Dodgers bullpen right now.
Alex Vesia last night after the game was interviewed by Kirsten Watson, and he was amped up, obviously, after he'd just gone, but he was more focused on when he was asked kind of like what's going through his head, how stoked he was because everyone has put in the work to get to this point. Everyone's playing for each other. Everyone's fighting for each other. And that's how you know that they're just not only super tight, but they're just different, right? They're all secure in their existence. They're all secure in kind of where they're at. Like you said, there's no showcasing, none of that. You even have a kid in Anthony Banda. He's a kid and he's learning real quick kind of what that culture looks like. But you see him everywhere with these guys. And that's a guy that's bought into the culture, and that's super important. And that's the way that you can kind of win these series, because I'm still convinced the series is going to go 7. I'm totally convinced of that because they're going to New York, all this stuff. But if you don't buy in, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not bought in, you're not going to fight for that next guy. You're not going to fight for the guy ahead of you, right? Vesia, I'm paraphrasing. Vesia said that him and Blake Trinan looked at each other and said, "Hey, I got you." And there's certain things you've seen it in your time in baseball too, when there's guys that have that non-communicative kind of dialogue where it's like, "Hey, I got your back, you got mine." That's when you know that they're just special. Like it's just one of those where there's nothing to prove. Let's just go get this thing done, and if we don't, then we fight again for tomorrow.
Yeah, it served them well all up until this point, and it really will serve them well now. So it's an important dynamic, and the one that if the Dodgers do win, then you're going to look back and say that was a huge, huge part of the equation, and other teams actually should learn from it.
100%. And last thing before we talk about Game 3, if the Yankees don't re-sign Juan Soto, they're dumb. There's just no other way to put it. Like, this is right there on the table for them. Like, I know that the Steinbrenners are very different than the old guy, the old man. Very, very different, mindset and mantra to it. But in my opinion, Juan Soto's a Yankee. Juan Soto should be a Yankee for a very long time. And if they don't do that, then that's just malpractice to not only the fan base, but to the organization, because that's the guy. That's the guy. That's a generational talent that I don't think wants to come to the West Coast after being here. In my opinion, he's a Yankee, and he should be a Yankee. And again, that's just that's my opinion. A little West Coast bias in there too, but it just wouldn't make it. Just doesn't make it would not make sense to see him in another uniform. But kudos to him too for betting on himself, because he turned down a massive extension from the Nationals.
Yeah, 440. Yeah.
440, and that takes a lot of balls, man. That takes a lot of balls. There's no other way to put it.
You not only did it, you not only bet on yourself, but you ultimately did it in what can be a really tough market that can go sideways.
Yep.
Right. And that's another reason why the Yankees, to your point, I totally agree. Say, hey, here you go. Whatever you need. We have to take advantage of this Aaron Judge window as much as we can. And Juan Soto, you're going to be the guy who's going to do that, because finding the guy to complement the other guy at that level is really, really hard. But we have two teams right now who are doing a perfect job of that.
And you gave up a lot right, to get
Yeah.
Soto. You gave up a dude that, I mean, he was lights out for the Padres, and Michael King. You gave up some other pieces. So for me, that's the other reason it makes the most sense in the world to go out and just, hey, what's this got to look like? What do we have? What's the framework of this deal? Let's start talking about it and make it work. Looking ahead to Game 3, Walker Buehler is going for the Dodgers. If I'm not mistaken, I'm double checking to make sure that I'm not spreading misinformation here. If I'm not mistaken, for the Yankees, allegedly it's Clark Schmidt. Am I right, or am I wrong? Or am I making
Yeah,
that
no,
up?
that would make sense. Yeah.
Um, this is an interesting game because Clark Schmidt in the regular season was kind of the quiet guy. He quietly had a 2.8 ERA. I know he threw 4 2/3, if I'm not mistaken, kind of both times against the Royals and the Guardians. Again, quietly did it. But his home ERA wasn't great. It was like 4.5 ERA. And then on the other hand, Walker Buehler was kind of proving, to everyone, I'm a big time pitcher. I'm a big game pitcher. This is what I want to do. I mean, he's been kind of screaming from the mountaintops, if the Dodgers want me, I want to be here for a long time. All these different things. It's kind of for me, at least as a baseball purist, which is nerd, nice way of saying that. It's the matchups I like because it's kind of like your unsung heroes that just go out and do the work, right? Am I looking at it a little too much through the weeds, Rob?
No, I mean, comes back to what we're talking about. I think that the thing that makes this series so close is that we're through Game 3 right now, and we haven't had to see a bullpen game. Thank you. And we have to see the bullpen game. You have pitchers, every pitcher, whether they did it or not, you can say, all right, they might be able to get to 6 innings. I mean, I wouldn't say Rodon was going to be that guy, but okay,
Right.
You can see that in a best case scenario. And I think that's the case when you go to Game 3. I think Buehler is a guy along the lines of Yamamoto. And again, you would have a better vibe of this than me, but I do feel it was the same sort of thing. It's like, this is a slow play. This is the slow play of Buehler amping things up, and then boom, you're getting your best version of Walker Buehler. It kind of feels that way. And Clark Schmidt is undeniably an underrated pitcher, a pitcher that can absolutely go out, pitch 6 or 7 innings, give up run. I've seen him do it before. But I think it comes down to that. Like, I think it comes down to how much protection can you give these bullpens? I fully expect, and maybe I'll be wrong, I fully expect to be a very similar game in Game 3 where these teams head into the last innings where it could go either way. And then you're just going to see, hey, listen, which pitcher, which guy is going to be able to take advantage of what reliever is having an off night.
No, and I agree. And I mean, and here's the thing, man. Both teams, everyone's a little banged up, right? Up to this point. Everyone is. Freddie Freeman, what he's doing, and this is coming from working in football, when a guy gets a high ankle sprain or whatever the sprain, they put him in a boot sometimes because they just have to stabilize it because it sucks. And there's instances too where high ankle sprains require surgery. And so what he's doing is nothing, especially on being on this side of 30. If it was on the younger side of 30, it'd be different, right? But being on this side of 30, like I wake up sometimes and my back hurts just because I'm 38. Like it just sucks, right? And for him to be doing what he's doing is nothing short of miraculous. That's not even being just biased as a Dodger and apologist. It's just insane. Anthony Rizzo is playing through some stuff too. My guy's got 2 fractured fingers. Listen, I have a pin in my hand right now. I'm left-handed. So like trying to do anything dominant sucks. And he's playing through the pain, and apparently they're kind of, keeping an eye on the pain tolerance, because if you do anything with broken fingers, swinging a bat, catching a ball, whatever, that sucks. And so that's, I think, going to be kind of where this is going to start heading to. Like you said, it's some of those injuries, managing them, treating them, doing whatever. But this game, I mean, again, unsung heroes. I mean, Clark Schmidt had 2 no decisions in the postseason. That's one of those where he's quietly doing what he's doing in an underrated way. And I think, to your point, depending on how this goes, I mean, if the Dodgers beat the Yankees in Game 3, you have to go for the throat. You have to.
Oh yeah.
Because no matter what, there's 3 games in New York. No matter what, that is not changing. And so you have to go for the throat. And for me, it's either you go Flaherty, or if you lose that game, you still go Flaherty. And then depending on what happens with that game, then you decide, okay, we're going for the throat here. We're going for the clincher. you have to go Yamamoto, in my opinion. I mean, you have to ride that hot hand, no?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to how much you're able to protect that bullpen, because at some point, they're going to go with they would have to go with if they you go to that point, you're not going to be able to close things out. You're going to have to find that bullpen game, and you have to protect your bullpen at some point. And that's where you hope that Flaherty or Yamamoto is able to do that, like they did. But oh my God, you can't keep you. I look at the closers right now, the Trinan and Weaver.
Yeah.
And you were watching Trinan, and he's like, just what's going through his head. Like he just every pitch, like just one more, one more, just one more. And you're just like, you know that this guy is doing everything he possibly can to unload everything he has, but the tank is just emptying and emptying and emptying. It's like, you're running out of gas and you're rolling to the exit on the turnpike. It's like all of that. And then Weaver, I'm going to tell you, like Weaver isn't the pitcher now than he was when the playoffs began, because that pitcher was unbelievable. Yeah. I think Weaver is becoming more and more hittable. So anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I just think it's really, really important. I would love to see them do exactly what you said, but you got to be able to protect the bullpen if you do have to ultimately land in the bullpen game. And the last thing I will say is that, as you're talking about injuries, all I can think about is it's not going to be unbelievably cold in New York, but it is going to be a lot colder than it was in Los Angeles.
100%.
So for a guy, and I know they just played in New York, but a guy like Freddie Freeman, you perfectly detailed what that ankle is feeling like and what you have to go through. And the power of cortisone is very, very, very prevalent.
Yes, it is.
But cortisone, from what I understand, is the best. So,
yes. If you've never had a cortisone shot, they suck, but they feel so good. They feel so good. I just lost your audio.
Somebody keep your eye on anyway.
Yeah, no. And I think, listen, New York is going to be rocking. This is their first World Series since 2009. First pennant since 2009. If we know anything about that fan base, this is what they live for. This is absolutely what they live for. And so that for me, I think is also going to be another kind of thing to look at is, I vividly remember in those, late 90s, early 2000s, the runs where that place was rocking every time that they played, right? The Jeters, the El Duque, all these guys lived to play in New York during that time. This is Aaron Judge's also first World Series.
Yeah.
So, that in itself is a big, big thing going into it as we kind of look ahead for that, because they have, no matter what, like I said, there is 3 games there guaranteed. If they win game 3, there's 2 more, no matter what. And if that's the case, then it goes back to LA. It's a different story, but that's going to be interesting to see too, to how, and you've been there, right? It's not the old Yankee Stadium where everything was necessarily on top of you. They're still pretty on top of you, right? They're still really loud. They're still really obnoxious. And some of the, Anthony Banda, who I just mentioned, this is going to be a big test for him going into, and Citi Field is an intense place, but Yankee Stadium during a World Series, very different.
Yeah. It's you're right. But to the point about Citi Field, to the point about Petco Park, they've gone through some pretty good car washes when it comes to this stuff, like some
Absolutely.
pretty intense stuff. But I will say this, I think consistently, I haven't seen anything like what Philadelphia is. Like, I've never seen anything like that, where you're just they're trying to impact the game every single pitch. Yankee Stadium isn't necessarily that level. But I will say this about Yankee Stadium, having been there for these things, in the big moments, there's not a lot of ballparks that feel on top of you, like old, new, doesn't matter, that the New York fans do. And that's what they're going to have to, that's where the rubber's going to meet the road for these guys. So it's going to be great. Listen, these first 2 games have lived up to everything. It's been great.
Yeah.
It's been great. And it's been, it's just, this is such it's how we should be punctuating the major league season, and it's how it's living up to every little bit of the hype so far.
Well, as Chad Jennings said on the episode that I did a couple days ago, that we spent so much time talking about all of their flaws on both sides, the Yankees and the Dodgers. And we kind of just forgot what their strengths are. And this is a direct quote from Chad Jennings. They're just both really fucking good.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this World Series great, because you have two juggernauts and heavyweights, however you want to look at it, that are just trading blows, right? And it's, the first time for Ohtani, first time for Judge, all these things, right? And now it's a matter of who's going to capitalize on the mistakes, because it's going to happen. I mean, we saw it, we've seen it, and so now that's why I'm really excited for Game 3, because listen, it's just like in football, right? Football's better when the Raiders are good. Football's better when the Jets and the Giants are good, allegedly. Basketball, when the Lakers are better, basketball's better. Baseball is so much better when the Yankees are good, right? And we get to see a World Series there for the first time in a really long time, and that for me, it's just going to be electric. It's going to be a little nostalgic, having, like I mentioned, those early 2000s teams. But this is a very different era, very different team, and again, it's Dodgers Yankees. Like, it's what everybody wanted. So quit looking at the flaws, and let's just look at it for what it is.
I was like, oh man, I flew home on the red eye, and red eye flights always, everybody knows. Yeah, they always seem like a good idea when you buy them, and it's the worst idea when you do them. And then so I'm recovering all day. Then like now I'm getting in the car for the 4-hour drive to New York. But now, Alonso, thank you. You like got my blood pump. You got the light at the end of the tunnel for like actually going to these things, because I could be as skeptical as anyone and be like, oh, really? I got to go to another World Series game. Really? But
what a first world pain.
Yeah, it's and by the way, so I wanna know, like, we have the go to @BB isn't boring, the social accounts, which there's one post that it dropped in Sunday, which seems to be doing very well, which is where Joe Kelly has agreed to get a baseballs are boring tattoo if the Dodgers win, which I will have to do as well. I don't have any do you have tattoos?
I do on my thigh.
Okay. So I do not have any. As I said, this is a big commitment. He has some. But you had said that you were in.
I'm in. If the Godfather pays for it, I'll be there.
That's right, because this is going to be as it's oh my goodness, who Mr.
Cartoons.
Mr. Cartoon. Mr.
Cartoon, sorry.
Yeah, the cream of the crop when it comes to tattoo artists.
Yeah, the guy.
The guy. And that's where we're going. So yes, if he's paying, let's line him up. Let's line up the chairs. Let's go.
Listen, I think it's in my contract that I think
we pay you in T-shirts and tattoos. That's yes. And vibes.
That I'm pretty to the free benefits and benefactoring from it. I mean, at some point I'm gonna lobby for him to also get me a Porsche, but that's a conversation for another day. No, and I kudos to you for agreeing to that, because that's a big commitment. If you've gone, as long as you've gone on this floating rock with no accessories on the body, if you will, and now you're ponying up to it, that's a big.
Well, kudos to my wife for agreeing to let me agree to it, and also, like anything, listen, I'm so happy that you're part of our family. I'm so happy, like everybody who's participating, everybody's in on this. I mean, we've been doing it for the podcast now for 2 years. Actually, probably like 2-year anniversaries, probably as we're taping this. Oh. And yeah, I mean, literally, it's so. But it's not a hard thing to scream from the mountaintops. And so I don't, of all the things that I would tattoo on my body, this would be number one on the list. And listen, I'm all for a good time. Like, this go. It's like, really? I mean, and this is and that's why Joe is a perfect guy for this whole thing, because it's the same thing why he wears a mariachi jacket to the White House, right?
Yeah.
Like this is about having fun, right?
It's supposed to
about
be
having
fun.
fun.
Yeah, it's supposed to be fun. Here's the plan. We'll get tattoos, we'll get some tacos, and then obviously we'll have to get double doubles because Joe Kelly's involved. Like we have to.
Let's go. I mean, all part of forget about the parade. This is the most important thing. So yes. So
I think what we should do is we should get a tattoo chair and maybe just do this at spring training where like we've talked, obviously this is something no one knows about. We riffed about doing some stuff for spring training, but I think the move is when we're doing that stuff that we've talked about during spring training, more to come on that. We get the chair in the house. We have Mr. Tunes come over and just knock out some baseball isn't boring tattoos as we talk baseball.
Listen, I'm all for that. I don't know if we're going to be able to execute it.
No, that's true. It's a pipe dream for sure.
Hey, listen, one thing I know, Alonso, is that you never know unless you ask. And
Yes.
we'll certainly ask. And even if it's not the tattoo chairs, we're going to have a good time in spring training. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be a good time for the rest of the World Series. It's going to be a good time in the off season. This is like we've been talking for whatever, almost an hour. It feels like 2 minutes because, it's fun to do. So
yes,
I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you. It's a pleasure to be here and to be a part of the team. If you're not, please subscribe to all the socials. They'll be somewhere on here. Producer Evan does a great job with all that stuff. But this is the end of this episode. It's presented by our friends at Wasabi Storage Cloud. We will catch you on the next one. Dodgers in 7 is still my prediction. If I am lying, you can call me a liar on the socials. Here's the problem. Bradfo's going to be at these games. I'm not because I'm an idiot and I booked a vacation during the World Series. So that tells you where I'm at in the believing side. But this has been West Coast Bias presented by Baseball Isn't Boring, and we will catch you on the next one.